So let's start. Just summarise Qatar's response. So yesterday, the Qatari Foreign Minister Mohammed Abdulrahman al-Thani, he gave a presentation in Chatham House in London and set out Qatar's position. What was that? How did you see Qatar's position?
Well, it's quite interesting. First of all, we chose London to do it. I think that was sort of made sure they could get the message out there and also show that the ties with the West aren't really being affected by this. And the main message he was putting across: one, the demands weren't reasonable; two, they weren't expecting this at all. So he brought up the meeting in April, the summit, and then the summit in May, which coincided with Trump's visit. He said there was no indication there that this was going to be forthcoming a couple of weeks later. And he basically said he didn't feel that terrorism was at the heart of it. He thought there were some other motives.
So my reading of it was that he was trying to position Qatar as the innocent victim of an illegal aggression. He said we're a beacon of free speech and we promote education and development of women in society and all of the things the West would want to hear, and that Qatar is being penalised for having its own direction rather than going with what Saudi Arabia or UAE wants. Is that how you read it?
Yeah, it was quite a robust refutal of all the allegations. And you're right, there was no concessions made at all, or the tone. He did say that they wanted to negotiate, they wanted to talk about it. But in terms of what's been said and put to them so far, he made it clear that that wasn't acceptable.
And so that's the Qatar position. If we then move to Cairo, we had the foreign ministers from the four primary blockading countries giving their response to Qatar's response. What was that?
So what they've announced, I mean, not much said. They've said that they weren't happy with Qatar's response, and they said the restrictions are going to continue. So that is the closed borders, closed airspace, and the movement of people. That they will continue indefinitely. And I think they were disappointed with Qatar's response. They said it lacked content.
And then before the meeting in Cairo, there was a lot of noise, particularly coming from the UAE officials in the foreign ministry in the UAE, but also from Saudi, that there would be an escalation, that if Qatar did not meet the deadline for the requirements, they would be out of the GCC. That was it, done. And so there was a lot of anticipation of some sort of additional sanctions, but we didn't hear anything about that.
I think there was relief overall that they were able to avoid that measure of escalating the existing restrictions or blockade, as we call it now.
Do you think that represents the fact there was no escalation? Does that represent an olive branch, or is it just because?
No, I mean there was relief, but at the same time it raises more questions in terms of how long will this uncertainty last, and what's the next move, and a lot of it will probably depend on the skill of the mediator, being the Emir of Kuwait. Some would say that, and some people are saying it's also probably an outcome of the diplomatic efforts of Qatar, that somehow they have to hold on and show some restraint in terms of proceeding with further sanctions.
So is your reading of it then that we had the rhetoric beforehand, which was basically trying to force the threat, I suppose, if we call it that, but in reality, both sides want to come to some concession or some agreement, and therefore they've not gone for the full. Well,
no one is saying that, but that's what I think that's what most people want to hear. We tend to listen to what we want to hear. So it depends on whose analysis we take, really. But I think it's quite important to note, for instance, that that these countries are in a very interesting points in their histories. New leadership, young leadership. We were expecting positive structural reforms, although this is probably a result of years or decades of a lack of accord among them. But it could undermine the gains that have been made in terms of reforms. You see Saudi Arabia, for instance, making structural reforms to attract more investments. You have the Dubai Expo coming in 2020 and FIFA World Cup in 2022. So they're all at a very interesting juncture of their histories.